What is leadership? What is involved in leadership? What are some of the leadership styles? Who is a leader? These are some of the questions that I'll be discussing today. I'll be addressing them today in this session. So let's start by defining what is leadership. What are your thoughts on that? What do you think leadership is? At its very base, leadership is the ability to influence someone. So whether that someone is yourself, or one other person, or many persons, or a team, or an organization, if you are influencing someone else, then that makes you a leader. You are engaged in the act of leadership. So what is expected of someone who is engaged, who is involved in the act of leadership? Well, the list of skills, attributes are extensive for a person who is in the act of leadership to be effective. And the library on leadership is quite vast with very little agreement. But in spite of that, there are some things that are consistent throughout the literature, and I have listed some of them that where someone engaged in the act of leadership, this would be some of the expectation for them to be effective. So let's start with power. By virtue of their title or whether it is their relationships, someone who is a leader has power. Why? Because persons are looking to that person for guidance, for motivation, for inspiration, for instruction. And so leaders need to understand that whether it is direct or indirect power, they wield power, whether by their title or by the relationships that they've built. So by virtue of influencing another person, you are wielding some form of power. The next attribute is teamwork. Especially in an organization, teamwork is key. And what would that be? The leader has to facilitate teamwork. He has to bring together a group of people. They have to join hands. They have to band together to work towards the achievement of a goal. And like power, they are expected, like a leader is expected to use his power or her power. We have mainly females in this group, to use her power towards influencing persons toward a goal, especially in an organization. That they're expected to do the same thing with teamwork. How do you bring the team together to move them in the direction of achieving their goal? The next thing that a leader has to be in order to maintain the respect of his team members, her team members, is they have to be skilled. They have to be competent at what it is that they're doing. Certainly in the technical area of their work, they cannot be lacking. They should be one step ahead of the game. They should know the details of the job. They should be able to understand where the market is going, where their unit, where that discipline is going. They should be reaching for the stars. They shouldn't be complacent and settled, because if they're complacent and settled in their knowledge, in their understanding, in their willingness to grow, then they're going to feel threatened by the bright stars around them. And that's not a good thing for a leader, to feel threatened. So to not feel threatened, you should be skillful, you should be growing, you should be reaching for the stars, you should be learning. And learning is not equal to going and getting a PhD. It's about growing in the knowledge of the industry and learning about other industries and understanding where you can have mergers, where you can have shared information, shared knowledge that can be applied to your situation, even though you're not in that discipline necessarily. So the leader should be skillful, the leader should be competent. The leader also has to be able to motivate their team members, to get them into that celebratory mode, to be rah-rah about the goals, about what it is that they want to achieve together. And the leader plays the role of cheerleader for their team members, there to support them, there to celebrate them, there to encourage them, there to lift them up. But with that motivation, another key skill is communication. The leader needs to be able to have open dialogue not just between herself and individual team members, but to create an environment where team members can have open and clear dialogue among themselves. Later I'll talk to you a little bit about culture, but understanding the different cultures, the different personalities, the different wants, the different needs, the different desires, the different learning styles among your team members, and having clarity about what works best for the group is important, because miscommunication is one of the fastest ways to derail any plan. And so having that space, to be able to create that space for open and clear and honest communication, is a very important skill for leaders to have. The next thing I want to talk about is innovation. Again, as I mentioned before, with the skill and the competence, leaders have to be ahead of the pack. They have to think outside of the box. Nothing stays the same forever. And so in a changing world and in a changing industry, whatever industry you're in, rules change, things change, people change, and leaders have to be able to adapt to that change, to innovate, to anticipate some of what is going to come, and to prepare themselves for it, and to be able to respond, not react, respond effectively when things happen, as they very often do. So innovation is another key skill of leaders. Leaders should also bear in mind that they bear responsibility for their team. They literally hold their team in their hands, right? You hold your team in your hands, your team member, and you have to bear them up, but you also have to give guidance and in some cases discipline where necessary. You have to show as the leader that you are responsible, and that they in turn need to be responsible for themselves, for their duties. So responsibility is one of the other key skills that a leader should have. And of course, support goes almost without saying. Team members expect support from their leaders, and leaders are not only required to support team members, but again, as with most of these skills, it's to create an environment where the leader is not the only person giving support, giving ideas, giving advice, giving a shoulder to cry on, or celebrating. It's a space where all the team members are doing that, where we come together collectively to brainstorm, where when things are not going so well, we help to share the burden for the other person. And when things are going great, we come together and we celebrate that. So creating an environment of support is very, very important for leaders to have that skill. And the final skill, I call it the superhero skill, is transcendent. It's rising above the fray. It's thinking outside of the box. It's anticipating problems. It's not getting involved in the weeds. It's being a visionary. And sometimes it's seeing the dragon or the Goliath that is there blocking your team members and slaying it if you have to, so that progress can happen. And that's what transcendent is. It's about decision making. It's about agility. It's about thinking outside of the box. It's about rising above the fray. So superpower skill, I say, because not so easy to do and all encompassing in one person, but a leader comes with many expectations, and these are just a few of the more, I would say, common ones that are expected of leaders, that leaders are expected to do and be in their day-to-day operations. So I guess we are talking about leadership. We've said what leadership is. We've said what is involved in leadership. Who is a leader? Of all the definitions of leadership, Dr. Brené Brown has my favorite. I'm very excited about her definition of leadership because it doesn't focus so much on profits and, a blind obsession with achieving goals. It focuses on people. It focuses on improvement. It focuses on moving things to the next level, on being your best. So what is her definition? Her definition is this: anyone who takes responsibility for finding the potential in people and processes and has the courage to develop that potential, that person is a leader. So let's break it down. Well, implicit in that is that being a leader is hard work, right? There are hairpin corners, jagged curves, deep ravines and steep hills and stuff like that. But there is also so much joy in being a leader. And you'd be saying to yourself, maybe, joy? What's she talking about? Where's the joy? So the joy comes from developing the potential. When you've put in the effort, when you've worked with your team members, when you've helped them to grow, when you've guided them, you've mentored them, you've coached them, you've trained them, and you see them bloom, there is joy in that. There is joy in developing that. And yes, it takes courage to go through that process and to rumble through that, but the end of it is brilliant, right? And this definition is so external. It has nothing to do with you being great and focusing on you. It's about you serving people and serving your organization, finding the potential in people and processes, that next level. And guess what? Finding the potential in people, that's complicated. That's why you need courage, because, well, we are different. We have different personalities, different backgrounds, different education, different experiences, different knowledge of things. There's so much that's different about us. And when you are the leader with all these individual persons in a room, in a group, in a team, in an organization, and you head that, and you have to now find the common thread in all of these individuals to bring them together. And while you're doing that, you still have to simultaneously think about what's the next level for John, what's the next level for Anna, what's the next level for Tariq. You have to think about what does each individual need, what is the potential in that person, and how can I help that person to grow and bloom. And that's what being a leader is. It's looking at each person on your team and saying, where is the potential and how can I bring it out? And then in the organization, it's looking at the processes and thinking, how can I do this more effectively? How can we be more productive? How can we grow? And how can we develop, and how can we be better, and how can we take this to the next level? That is what being a leader is. And yes, it requires courage, because as I said before, it's hard work, but it's so rewarding to do that. And the next thing I'm going to talk about is your leadership style, because that is now when you think about what are the techniques that I'm going to use to find and then develop this potential. And being a leader it's not an easy road, but it's a very, very, very rewarding road to take. How you lead is your leadership style. These are the techniques that you use to find and develop the potential in your team members, in the processes, in whatever it is that you're doing within the organization. And the Hay Group has a nice definition for leadership style. It defines leadership styles as the techniques people use to influence, motivate, and direct others to meet the organization's goals. And there are many styles of leadership there, and I will discuss 3 with you today, but there are so many styles of leadership. So the ones that I will discuss with you today are the more popular ones. But in all of what I'm doing, what I really want you to focus on is, what is my style of leadership? What am I going to walk away with as my takeaway? Who do I want to be? What do I want to be known for? What is my legacy that I would like to leave as a leader? When people are thinking about me, when people are speaking about me, what do I want them to think about? And I'm going to put together that framework and fill in the blanks of who I want to be as a leader and what I want to be known for. So as you go through, I want you to think about, what is your style of leadership? What kind of leader would I like to be? So as I said before, we've already done the survey. We know what the different competences are. We know what our feedback is, both in terms of what we thought about ourselves and what our team members and or peers and or manager or leader thought about us. And the questions that I want you to think about is, having gone through that survey and looked at those questions, is what would I like people to say about me regarding my ability to share a vision, or to motivate persons, in how I manage the performance of others, in my ability to take action and to influence other persons, in my ability to communicate, in my ability to be accountable and to hold people accountable to the things that they say that they're going to do, in my emotional intelligence, my awareness of how I'm impacting others, how others are impacting me, how others are impacting each other. What is my ability in that? What would I like people to say about me where those things are concerned? In terms of relationship management, do I have good relationships with people? What do I want? It's not so much what others think, it's what you would like them to think, and what are the behaviors, what are the actions that you need to take in order to be able to have that perception, to live the life, to be the leader that you really, really want to be, to walk the talk, we would say, to be the person that you think you are, that you say you are, and that you want to be. So as we go through the session today, and as you write your paper, which we'll talk about later, these are some of the things that I'd like you to think about. So in terms of the theories of leadership, as I said before, I'm only going to touch on 3 of those theories, the full range of situational and servant leadership. But just to let you know that there are so many others. There is autocratic, there is authentic, there is authoritarian, there is Goldman has 6 theories, there is ethical leadership. There are so many leadership styles. I mean, we could go on and on and on, but these 3 are 3 of the more popular ones, and these are the 3 that I'm going to discuss in a little bit more detail. So the full range includes transformational leadership and transactional leadership. Those are highly researched, highly studied leadership styles, and there is also 2 others in the full range. There is laissez-faire and there's management by exception, and I'll discuss that a little further. Situational leadership, I believe, is a leadership style that can be used in conjunction with every and any leadership style. It is very flexible. It's applicable to whatever situation you are in and whatever you're dealing with. And I think that's a leadership style that works with other leadership styles. And then there's servant leadership, which is idealistic in the sense that there are a lot of factors that could hamper this leadership style from being implemented. And as I discuss servant leadership a little later with you, I will get into more details as to how it would work and when it would work best in an organizational setting. So let's talk about the full range of leadership. So as I said before, there's transactional leadership, there's transformational leadership, there's also laissez-faire leadership and management by exception. And there's some management by exception that falls within transactional leadership. So let's start with laissez-faire. Laissez-faire is, as the name suggests, it's a very hands-off approach to leadership. You basically, you do whatever you want, and you let persons do whatever they want, and there is no accountability, there is no guidance. It's a very hands-off approach. Management by exception basically follows the mantra, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, or wait until it's broke before you address it, which again, I don't think personally is a very effective style of leadership. And I think the laissez-faire is the least effective style of leadership. And then you have the transactional and the transformational. Transactional leadership is what is used a lot in organizations. And this involves an exchange of effort or achieving objectives for compensation or reward. So you do this and I will give you that. That is transactional leadership. Whereas transformational leadership is more of an inspirational style of leadership. It's the style of leadership we all aspire to, one that challenges, that motivates, that stimulates your mind. And leaders are leading by example, and they're creating a vision that persons want to follow, and they're inspiring people to want to rise above and beyond themselves. And they want to develop their team members so that they can achieve these goals. And that's transformational leadership. So let's start with transformational leadership. The Kouzes and Posner model. I mean, there's several models of transformational leadership. We're going to be looking at two, and this is the Kouzes and Posner and the Burns, Bass, and Avolio model. So for the Kouzes and Posner model, it's about, there are 5 tenets. And the first is modeling the way, which is basically being an example for other persons to emulate. It's being a role model. The next would be encouraging the heart. And in that one, you're being supportive of your teammates. You're recognizing them as individuals. You're considering what drives them individually to do what they do to get them towards their goal, and you're taking those things into consideration as you engage them. The third is inspiring a shared vision, and this is a vision that is larger than any individual. It's a vision that the team members look towards. It's something larger than them, than you. It's huge, and you're motivating and inspiring persons to want to achieve things beyond themselves. And the fourth is enabling others to act. Yes, you want them to achieve these things, but now you have to empower them. You have to empower them to be able to do it. And that could be through coaching, through training, to take decisions, give them greater responsibility, owning a process. These are some of the ways that you enable other persons to act. And finally, there is challenging the process. And in challenging the process, what you are saying is the status quo is not acceptable. I want you to think outside of the box. I want you to say, how can we do this better? How can we get here faster? What is the best way around this? Remember in Dr. Brené Brown's leadership, we're looking about developing the potential in people and processes. Well, challenging the process is one of the ways that we do that, because we're saying the status quo may be good, but how can we make it better? How can we improve it? And so it's a way of innovative thinking where you're always looking at what's the next step, what's the next level. And you're not so much in competition with others, but you're in competition with your best self. How can I be better? How can we collectively as a team be better? And so this is the Kouzes and Posner model. The Burns model is the original author on the full range leadership model, and it was later enhanced by Avolio and Bass. I say Bass, could be Bass. And this model uses more academic language, I would say. So whereas the Kouzes and Posner uses more relatable language, the Avolio and Bass model uses language that is more academic. And in this model, it's the same things that they're discussing, but instead of 5, it's 4, and they've merged 2 in under inspirational motivation. So let's look at them and compare the 2 models. I'll also just say for the Burns model that it is the model most studied by academia. There are numerous studies that show that there is a direct and positive relationship between transformational leadership and positive organizational outcomes, such as productivity, such as employee satisfaction, such as how organizations relate in their community. So when you're looking at the leadership style that you want to embrace, that you want to adapt, you want to look at what has been proven versus what is just a theory as well. You want to consider what exists, what has been proven, what will work for me, and not just the theory, but what do we know for a fact based on studies that have been done that this actually works. So I just wanted to add that bit of information as it relates to Burns, Avolio, and Bass. All right, so now let's talk about modeling the way and Kouzes and Posner and how it relates to the Burns model. So in modeling the way, it is related to idealized influence. And under idealized influence, modeling the way looks not just at your behavior, but it also looks at who you are as an individual. So they call it idealized influence attributes and idealized influence behavior. Who am I? So persons, you want persons to model not just your actions, but who the values that they see in you, the character that they see in you, the traits that they see in you. What are some of those traits? Who do I want to be? Who do I want persons to emulate? What do I want them to emulate from me? And that's modeling the way, not just modeling in terms of your behavior, but modeling in terms of who you are as a person, how you're being, what your character is. The next is encouraging the heart. And that one is tied to individualized consideration. And in this, you are looking at the individual and considering what motivates that person. And you're taking those factors into consideration when you're putting your team together. How will they work together? How do I need to motivate them to get towards, to achieve their goals? What are some of their shortcomings? How can I support them? So yes, you want the team to work together, but you have to think of people as individuals always. And we all have different needs, and we learn in different ways, and we're motivated in different ways. And when you are engaging your team members, you have to think of them first and foremost as individuals, and what does each individual require in order for me to encourage the heart. The next on the list is inspiring a shared vision, and I'm going to tie enabling others to act with that, and that falls on the inspirational motivation. And as the name suggests, it inspires you and it motivates you into action. So in this capacity, the leader, the transformational leader, is getting persons to be inspired and motivated by something that is larger than themselves, larger than the team. It is something that they dream about and that they feel really, really good being a part of, and they understand their role in bringing this vision to life. And that is being inspired by the shared vision. And then enabling others to act falls under this inspirational motivation, because now we are empowering them. We are empowering them with responsibility. We're empowering them with decision-making skills. We're empowering them with training and coaching and whatever tools they require to not only get the job done, but to also bring others into the fold to get the job done with them faster, quicker. So the inspirational motivation is very empowering. The last step is challenging the process. And Dr. Brown was talking about finding that potential and having the courage to develop that potential. Well, that's what challenging the process is for me. It's thinking outside of the box. It's not accepting the status quo. It's saying, what else? What next can we do? It's encouraging persons to be their best, to get to that next level. And that's what intellectual stimulation is. It's not about being nerdy or, okay, we're going to get our PhD or we're going to get our ACCA or whatever our next level academic thing is. But even without those things, how else can I move outside of the box? What is happening in other industries that could be applicable to my industry? What is happening in other departments that I could implement in my department to be more efficient, to take me to the next level? As an individual leader, what is the next step for me, and what are the skills that I need to have in order to move to that next level? And so it's thinking beyond where you are now and not limiting yourself to what is directly in front of you. And that's the challenging the process and intellectual stimulation. So these are some examples of persons who embody the different tenets of transformational leadership. So we're going to start with Socrates. And we know about Socratic dialogue, which is asking questions and asking more and more and more and more and more questions until you get to the root of the matter, until you get to a real understanding of what is going on. And that is what intellectual stimulation is. It encourages creativity, innovation. It's disrupting the status quo, as I said before. It's removing barriers to change and allowing persons to be independent in their thinking and to not feel funny if they say something that is outside of the norm, and to not feel shamed if maybe what they're saying maybe it doesn't even make sense, but it's being allowed to think outside of the box and to celebrate that. So that is intellectual stimulation, and Socrates, Dr. Socrates, would have been a perfect example for that. Idealized influence, being a role model, and Dr. Martin Luther King is a very good example of walking the talk, of being what you are encouraging persons to do. And you know, the Selma March would be a very good example of that, where he was against violence, and I suppose Mahatma Gandhi would have been somebody like that, who is anti-violence and protested in a way where even when you are being attacked, when you are being hurled, things are being hurled at you, you walk the talk. You were the person that you were encouraging others to be, and it's something to look up to aspire to. As a leader, what are some of the things that you would like to do that you think others would want to aspire to? What are some of the things that would make you a good role model? The third is Lee Kuan Yew, and he is the was the president of Singapore, and he had a vision for his country, and he took it from a state of nothingness, and we all know what Singapore is today. It's a vastly wealthy country where it has financial districts and things like that, and this was from his vision, and he basically got everybody on board behind this vision, you know, and got them to work towards it, and the nation came behind to bring Singapore from where it was when he took over to where it is today. So it's having that larger than life vision and getting persons to buy into that, to be guided by it, to be motivated by it, to be inspired by it, that they want to do whatever it takes to achieve it. And third on the list is Sam Walton, who is the founder of Walmart, and it is said anecdotally that he would personally go to the various Walmart stores to show his appreciation to the staff members that worked there. And you know, as he saw different personalities, as he encountered different persons, he would adapt his style and his way of being to these persons. And you know, there was career development. People could grow in the organization, and he was somebody who was just genuinely concerned for the well-being of other persons. He was a people person at heart, loved people, wanted to do well for people, cared about people. So these are the examples of the different tenets of transformational leadership personified. So let's talk a little bit about transactional leadership. Now, transactional leadership is primarily known for contingent reward. It's an exchange. You give me this, I give you that. You do this work, you get this reward. You know, it's a carrot system, basically, a reward system. And it's very practical, and it's used in organizations. It's used in every organization. That's how organizations function. But transactional leadership is particularly effective when something needs to be done quickly in the short term, when it's applied to something that's very practical, where you can put in structures, where you can put in systems, versus something that's very theoretical. And persons are externally motivated because you have a short time frame, you're giving them a reward. That's what is motivating them. And it's not so much about what we're gonna, you know, accomplish in terms of grand vision at the end. It's more about, let's get this done, and we need to get it done in this time, by this date. It needs to be done this way. And so that's how transactional leadership, it's very exchange oriented. And for all the leadership styles that you're going to look at, whether it's transformational, transactional, situational, ethical, you know, authoritarian, whatever, all leadership skills have their strengths. Leadership styles rather have their strengths, have their areas that are not as strong, weaknesses. And so you have to pull from it what you need. But what we do know is that with transactional and transformational leadership, there is a lot that could work together. So again, we're looking at the difference. Transactional, there is about exchange you do this, I give you that. Whereas transformational is I'm engaging you in a process and I want you to dream big. Transactional leadership says, this is your reward. Transformational leadership is about inspiring persons to want to do it. They don't need to be rewarded. The end is the reward in and of itself. In transactional leadership, it's short, it's tight. You want to control the process. In transformational leadership, it's about empowering persons to get to where you need them to be. In transactional leadership, you just really, really want the job to be done quickly. And in transformational leadership, you want to develop persons along the way. And so what we know, because there have been studies that look at these things, is that when you combine transformational leadership with transactional leadership, people perform beyond your wildest expectations. Where transformational leadership is the primary leadership style, but as needs require, you include the contingent reward aspect of transactional leadership. And because we're all motivated by rewards, but it's not necessarily our driving force, and it depends on what the circumstances are that will motivate us towards these rewards or towards the bigger vision or the dream. So something to think about. So what I would like you to do right now is identify a situation. Think about something that you are going through at work right now and how you could use transformational leadership and transactional leadership to get a better result. I'd like you to think about that. I'd also like you to prepare that example to share with the group on Friday. So that example that you're going to be working on, you're going to share it with the group on Friday. So whatever it is, make sure it's something that you can share. Okay, good. So we move on to situational leadership, which is a theory by Blanchard and I believe Hersey. And in this leadership model, it looks at the team member and their state of readiness, their competence, and their motivation, how willing they are to do the work, their commitment to it. So as you can see on your screen, we have 4 quadrants, and I am going to go through each quadrant with you. So in the first quadrant, you have what we call directing, and this is when they just really don't know what they're doing. They're very excited to do it. They have high commitment. They're motivated, so you don't have to keep following up and saying and checking it on them. They're motivated to do, but they don't know what to do. So you have to be very specific, very directive. Do X, do Y, do Z, do it in this order, and very precise about what it is that you require of them. And this is in the directing, the red quadrant. We move up now towards the coaching quadrant, and this is where there is some competence, but not a lot, and there is no commitment, there is no enthusiasm, there's no motivation. And so we have to coach, and that coaching can also be training, where we have to teach them what to do as well as inspire and motivate them to do that job. So this is in the orange quadrant in coaching. And we move now over to the supporting quadrant, the yellow quadrant. And this is where persons know what to do, but their commitment comes and goes. So we have to be there checking in on them, making sure they're okay, following up to see how they're doing, what support we can give them in terms of resources. Maybe it's a little pep talk, but whatever it is, it's not that they can't do the work, but it's that we need to follow through to ensure that the work is done. And finally, we get into the fourth quadrant, which is delegating, the green quadrant, and that's ideally where we would like everybody to be. We'd like to train them up to be at that place where we can delegate, give them the work and say run with it, because their competence is high, their motivation, their commitment to doing the work is high, and that's where we'd like all our team members to be. But we have to recognize that people are at different places. And even if we have somebody who is at stage 4 on one particular thing, and we introduce them to a new topic, to a new area of responsibility. They may still have high commitment, but they may actually fall into the red quadrant there because this is something brand new to them and they don't know how to do it. So you have to consider that for each situation, for wherever persons are, you have to look at where are they relative to the task that you're asking them to do in terms of their readiness, their competence, and in terms of their attitude, their motivation, their commitment to doing that job. And as I said before, situational leadership is something that I think you do in conjunction with transformational leadership or participative leadership or transactional leadership or authentic leadership or servant leadership. You can do it in conjunction with other leadership styles because it is that flexible and applicable to all situations, really. So servant leadership, the final one. And this is a theory by Greenleaf, Robert Greenleaf, where he says the servant leader is servant first. That is at the heart of servant leadership. It's not about flouting yourself as the leader and the person with all the power and the authority and the wealth and the fame. It's about, how can I help you? How can I help you to achieve your goal? How can I help you to be a better person? How can I support you so that you can achieve your goals, so that the organization can achieve its goals? What can I do for you? And it begins with just being humble and caring about other persons. And in servant leadership, it is, again, as I said, about empowering persons, about growing persons, about developing persons. The leader puts others above himself in every situation. It's not about him feeling great and give himself a pat on the back. It's, how can I support these team members? How can I grow them? How can I help them to be all they can be? It involves emotional well-being. It involves ethical behavior, because it's not about trying to cheat the system and beat the system and narcissistic behavior and get things for yourself. It's about creating value that can be shared not just among team members, but among clients and among the community in which you operate, where you reside, and spreading the love. It's creating value for the community. And servant leadership, as I was mentioning before, this style of leadership may be a little bit more difficult to implement in organizations. It's an idealistic style of leadership where we really want to give of ourselves. But let us take, for example, the Jamaican scenario, where we have a very hierarchical system, a very hierarchical culture. We're not as open to ideas from everybody. We're not that kind of culture. If you have someone being a servant leader, wanting to put you first, wanting to give you opportunities, wanting to grow you, some persons may view that as being weak or as passing off responsibility, passing off the buck. And I'll give you a practical example. When Digicel came to Jamaica, when the Irish came to set up, in Ireland, the culture is more open. Ideas can come from anybody, from everybody. They're open to growing persons and to sharing responsibility. And as I said before, the Jamaican culture is very hierarchical. So when leaders tried to engage their team members to say, take on a little greater responsibility, learn my job, maybe you can do this and grow into this role, they got a lot of resistance. Persons literally said to them, yeah, try give your work. And they didn't want to embrace that. And it was really more just a difference in culture, a difference in understanding what each person wanted and how they received the information. And it took a lot of open dialogue and training and training in culture even before they were able to come to a mutual understanding of where each person was and where they needed to be. So culture can be a real barrier in servant leadership being implemented. And where there is no trust, that can also be a barrier, because nobody's going to really believe that you want to help me to develop and be all that I can be, when your behavior does not lend itself to trust. So in this realm, it's a lovely leadership style to embrace, but I think that a lot of groundwork has to be laid for this leadership style to be accepted by a distrustful population, by a hierarchical population. That population is just not ready for this style of leadership. So in the Jamaican culture, the servant leadership style may actually be viewed as a weak style of leadership, because we have a culture that is very directive, and this participative, open style of leadership, the leader may be viewed as weak, and his status may actually decrease because of that. And what is status? Status is really how much influence you have as a leader. And leaders who can get things done without leaning on their title to get it done, but based on the relationships that they have, those leaders have high status. Their influence is strong. But when leaders have to lean on their title, on their position in an organization to get anything done, then those are what we call low status leaders. And they have to be very directive in what they want done. You know, they can't cede any power because they have so little to start off with, because they don't have influence. And when we look at the levels of leadership, we'll talk about how you influence and how you can increase your influence with your team members, because the lowest level of leadership, the lowest rung on the leadership ladder, is your position. If that's the only influence you have, if that's the only authority you have, then that's the lowest status you can have as a leader. But as you build relationships and demonstrate your competence and empower persons, then you rise on the leadership ladder. And when we get into levels of leadership, we'll talk a little bit more about that. But as I said, it depends on the influence you have. And when you are more participative, you have the ability to cede authority and to give persons authority, to empower your team members. But you can only do that when you have good relationships. If you don't have good relationships with your team members, that becomes increasingly difficult, and then you have to hang on to whatever little power you have, and it becomes a strenuous relationship. There's low trust in the environment when those things occur, and things progressively move from bad to worse. So we want to move from low status to high status, from directive to participative leadership. So overall, there is no one-size-fits-all approach to leadership. I think you should be able to get that from what I've said so far. I believe in an eclectic approach where you embrace the different factors of your personality. You embrace the different experiences you have as an individual, the knowledge that you bring to the table, and you encompass all of that, and you say, what out there would match that? Would I fit with? And it's rare, if ever, are you going to say, oh, I'm only transformational, or I'm only democratic, or I'm only ethical, or I'm only authentic. There are facets from these different leadership styles that complement you. And sometimes it may be 2 or 3 theories, but it could be as much as 7, because you are such a multifaceted person. And so as you go through your, watching this, you probably watch it more than once. Think about who you are as an individual, what you would like to achieve, what you'd like to be known for, and what are the different styles that suit your personality, that suit who you are, that suit what it is that you're trying to achieve. That is your starting point in leadership. You're looking at, what do I want the finish line, the end product, the final outcome to be? What is that? And then I work backwards. What are the things that I need to do to achieve that end product, to achieve that legacy of leadership? And I believe the eclectic approach is the way to do that. And you are going to write a paper about that. And I went a slide too fast. So no leadership styles talk is complete without talking about the dark side of leadership. And we would call that toxic leadership, the toxic triangle in academic circles. And toxic leaders have a few characteristics, but these leaders don't operate in a vacuum. We call it a triangle because we believe that the leader has to have certain characteristics. The followers enable this leadership behavior by either being conformers or colluders. And then there is an environment that is conducive to the toxicity. And that's generally because there is uncertainty and there is instability. So let's start with the leader and talk about the leader. Toxic leaders are autocratic. It's my way or the highway. They're narcissistic. It's always about them. They're self-serving people. They're highly manipulative, always trying to manipulate people to get what they want. Generally, more often than not, something that is in their best interest, not so much in the interest of the community, in the interest of the team. They're very intimidating and threatening in how they interact with you. They're sometimes charismatic. They have a way with words and can charm you. You can say they can charm you, but they're also highly competitive. And I believe that competition is good, but they are overly competitive, a little more than the norm, a little more than is healthy. There's a thin line between healthy competition and crazy competition. And toxic leaders step over that line. It's not just about winning and enjoying the win. It's about annihilating you while I'm doing it. It's about humiliating you and embarrassing you. They tend to be very discriminatory, and they have an ideology of hate. When we, as leaders, we want to develop the potential, they want to crush other persons. So it's never about enlarging the pie and widening what is there and making it larger and increasing the pie so that everybody can get a fair share. It's about more for me. How much more can I get? And I don't really care if you die. And so they only act in their self-interest. So that's what we're looking for when we're looking at the leader, the characteristics of the leader. Let's talk about the followers. So the followers fall into two categories. They're either conformers. The leader says jump, they jump. They need an authority figure in their life. They're intimidated. They have low self-esteem. They need to belong to a group. They're not strong human beings. And so because of their low self-esteem and their low self-confidence, they attach to somebody who they see as larger than life, and they conform to whatever that person tells them. Sometimes it's for self-preservation. They're afraid of this person, so they just conform so that they're not crushed. And they're generally not very mature people. They're not able to think through things on their own and come to a reasonable logical conclusion, so they accept whatever is given to them. On the other hand, you have the colluders, the people who are similar to this toxic leader, who have their own ambitions, who are imitating the style of this leader and have the same worldview and the same paucity of values and standards and are like mini-me's of this toxic leader. So they collude to make this leader grand and larger than life, and then they benefit from being in the shadow or sitting on the coattails of such a person. So those are the followers. And then you have the environment. In which environment would a toxic leader thrive? An environment of instability where things are changing. Today we're doing things one way, tomorrow we're doing it a different way. An environment of uncertainty. An environment where there's a perceived threat, where now it's them against you, and so you side with the leader because you are more afraid of them, whatever that them is or whatever it is out there that is a perceived threat to you. Maybe you operate in an organization or in a country where your values are questionable, where it's okay to lie, it's okay to cheat, it's okay to steal, it's okay to manipulate standards, it's okay to say something today and say something completely contrary tomorrow, it's okay to not apologize. If those are your standards, if those are your values, then toxicity is going to thrive in such an environment. And then, of course, one where there's no checks and balance, where people are allowed to do whatever, say whatever, and there is no recourse for the harm that they may cause. So when your organization is basically ineffective in having standards and holding people accountable to those standards, then you've created an environment where a toxic leader can thrive and destroy the organization and the people therein. So my assumption is that you are all good leaders, you are all good people, and you're all good leaders. Albert Einstein and Edmund Burke said the same thing, basically. The world will not be destroyed by those who do evil, but by those who watch them without doing anything. Similarly, all that is required for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. You are educating yourself and developing yourself to be better leaders. If while you're doing that, you sit by and say nothing and do nothing, when you see things that are wrong, you know things to be wrong, then essentially what you are doing is ceding power to toxicity and facilitating an environment where a toxic leader can thrive, can emerge, can thrive, and destroy your culture, destroy your organization. So I encourage you that yes, there are things that you can perhaps overlook, but if things are repeated, then they become a pattern. And once they become a pattern, then they become entrenched into culture. And you must think about whether or not things that are negative are things that you want to become entrenched in culture and that you are going to sit idle by and be a part of. So let's talk about your homework assignment. Yay! So this is, I want you to write a paper. It's about 1,500 words, which is about 4 pages on your personal theory of leadership, who you would like to be, what your legacy is going to be on leadership. And I'm going to send you a sheet that will delve into a little bit more detail about what I'm going to expect to see in that. But again, you can draw from the various theories, the ones that I've covered, others that you can research on your own. There's tons of information on the internet. But most importantly, I want it to be a practical paper. I want you to talk about the things that you would like to do and the things that you would like to be known for, and if you achieve those things, what they would look like. And that assignment is going to be due on Monday of next week, and you'll be presenting it on Friday of the following week. So a week to do the assignment and a week and a half to prepare yourself to present it. So send it to me by Monday. Hopefully I can get it back to you by Wednesday, God's willing, and with some notes, and then you can prepare yourselves to deliver your presentation on Friday. So that is it for now. I look forward to seeing you all on Friday. Take care.